Hello, in this video I'm going to talk a bit about Git Flow. Git Flow is a new tool that I've been using recently, and I've been using it in this latest project that I've been working on for a client, and someone introduced me to it, and I found that it saved me a hell of a lot of time, and it made working with Git working with Git projects a lot more seamless. So the tool is called Git Flow. If you search Google for Git Flow, one of the top results is, or the top result is this GitHub project. So it's an open source GitHub project that someone has kindly made and contributed. And it's basically a tool that works with Git to give you some kind of shortcuts to do the standard things that you would need to do when working in projects with teams. So like it's a way to standardize a workflow in a way that is compatible with most the ways that most companies work and most companies the typical kind of code workflow. So working on a commercial project, if you haven't worked in software development professionally before, as in an actual company, then this is definitely something that you want to learn before you go in, because it's something that will definitely get you ahead and make you stand out if you know this, if you're going in as an entry-level developer. Because working in teams on commercial projects in actual companies is a bit different from working on the small projects and at school. So when you have a small project, I'm going to demonstrate on a project that I have here. So I have this project that I've been working on that I did for a previous video. It's just a basic Hello World project, and I committed all of the changes that I did to Git. So the code is available on GitHub. Let me go back to my Git account. So it's this AngularJS gulp Hello World. So this is just a standard project, and as you can see that I've just been committing on the master branch the whole time, and because it's only me working on this project and it's just a kind of demo project, it doesn't really matter that I'm just committing on the master branch, because I'm not deploying it and I don't need like a big deployment process for this where I have to test it and stuff like that. But when you work on a commercial project, what they'll typically do is the team will have they'll typically split up their Git repositories into different branches. So you'll have your master branch, which should have the stable code, so the stable code base of the project. So that should be what actually works and what can be pushed to production. So it should be fully tested, fully working, and approved and signed off and everything, ready to kind of go to ship, as they say. And then what they'll have is a develop branch, which will have the development the kind of development stream of work. So that'll be the latest version that has the latest features, but perhaps hasn't been tested and isn't ready to go into production yet, or hasn't been signed off. So that's when it's in the stage where you're kind of showing it to people and testing it and doing all that. And then you'll have feature branches, which is when you're actually working on specific features. So that will be what you use as a developer to kind of locally have a specific feature that you're working on, and so you can switch between the kind of original code and the feature that you're working on and back and forth, and maybe you need to drop one feature and then work on a different feature. You can do that quite easily. So for some like big companies and stuff, maybe I'm simplifying the process a bit here, but this is kind of the basic understanding, is that you have your project split up into different branches, which allow you to kind of have a process around the deployment. So Git Flow is a tool that really helps you to keep that. Once you get used to using it, it helps you to kind of keep that standard flow. And I actually plan to use this on all of my projects that I do, even the kind of personal ones that I have, and the things for our business, the website and stuff like that. So I've started using it for all of that. And what it is, it's a tool that you install, and then it just adds a few command line commands or shortcuts that allow you to do certain things and make it easier for you to work in that kind of standardized thing. So if you head over to the GitHub page, so it's github/nvie/gitflow. I'll put the link in the notes. You can install it. Here's installation instructions, and it has different instructions for Mac, Linux, and Windows. So it's available for all of those platforms, which is great. So once that's installed, you get to you can basically type the git flow command. So I'll demonstrate it for you here now. So this is a Git project that that I have, just called Hello World. It's currently on the master branch, and as I said, everything so far has been committed on the master branch, and so it doesn't have any extra like develop branch and stuff like that there. So if I type Git Flow, I get a list of commands that are available from the Git Flow tools. So the first thing that you need to do when you have a project is initialize it. So if you type Git Flow init, this will initialize our local repository to work in the kind of Git Flow format. So what it does is it asks you what you want your production branch to be. So we're going to leave that as a master branch. Some companies might use a different branch. From what I've seen, most companies use the master branch as their kind of production live code that's like deployable. So we'll leave that. And the next is the release or the develop branch, or it says the next release branch. And that's basically the stuff that you're working on now. So that's the stuff that you're changing in the project. So the next version of the project before it's been released is the next release development branch. So typically, again, that will be just left as develop. I always like to leave it as develop. So we'll leave that as default. And then the next is the feature branch. And this is for any specific features that you're working on. And then you got bug fixes, and then release, and then the hotfix branch. So these are like prefixes to branch names here that it's showing you. So, and then the support branch, and then a version tag prefix, which we're again going to leave blank. So tagging is a feature in Git, which is usually it's used to tag a specific point in a project, and it's typically used for things like Jenkins builds, which is like an automation tool that allows DevOps to automatically deploy your project when it gets pushed. So what it'll do is it will listen to Git for a specific for a change in the tag name, and when it detects that the version tag has been increased, it'll do an automatic build and automatically deploy that version, the newest version of the for the tag with the latest version, basically. So that's the initialize done. So now that we've initialized, we can start testing out. You can see that after initialization, it's given us, it switches to develop branch. That's because anything you do, any change that you make will always first go on the develop branch. You should never, if you're using the Git flow and you're strict with it, you should never make changes on the master branch directly. It should always be on the develop branch. So you make your changes on the develop branch, and then when you've done your changes, you commit them, you push it to the central repository, then it can be tested, and then after it's been tested and it's signed off and everyone agrees that it's working and everyone's happy, then you merge it to the master branch, and then you push the master branch, and then that gets deployed to your live servers. So that's why it switches to the develop branch. So if you do git push now, git push origin, and you do all, this will push this develop branch to our GitHub repository. So if we let that go, internet's a little bit slow here. So you can see it started to push, and it's pushed this new branch develop. And then if we switch back to the Git repository for our project, here you can see if I refresh the page, under here you've now got the develop and the master branch. So they're both exactly the same at the moment because we haven't made any changes on it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to demonstrate how, if you're using Git Flow, how you would use the Git Flow tool in a kind of real life situation. So I'll open up my browser here. So let's say I need to work on a new feature or a change. So I'll open up my my text editor, Atom, and this is my project. These are project files. So let's say we want to add a feature, and we're going to call the feature add a pointless comment to the code. So what you would do is you would type git flow feature start, and then the name of the feature you want to do with it. It can't have any spaces. So let's say pointless comments. So now you can see that it switches to the feature branch. It's done feature / the name of our feature that we're working on. So what you could do is you basically make all your commits to the feature branch, and then you make all your changes and you commit them to the feature branch, and then when you're done, you use Git Flow to merge them to the develop branch. So we've switched to our branch, and now we're on this pointless comments branch. So let's go into the code, and let's just oops, using a new keyboard, so getting used to the new keys. Some pointless comments for our project. Okay, so now that we made the change, or the feature, we've worked on the feature, save the file, and then I'll add the files, and I'll do git commit added pointless comments. And now we've made our change or our feature, and we've committed it. So obviously in a real situation, you'd probably make more changes, and it would take a bit longer. But let's just say, for the sake of the demonstration, let's just say our changes are done. If you're going to be working on the same feature for a while, it might be a good idea to push the feature branch to the project to the Git repository. So you could do that by just typing git push. I just have git push origin, then it tells you what to do. I just copy and paste that. So if you do that, then it will push our feature branch to the project. It's not always necessary to do that, because I always like to do it, because then it makes sure that your project code is backed up. So especially if I leave the office or if I'm away from my computer, I typically will commit and push to the repository, so that I reduce the risk of losing any progress that I've done. Now that we've pushed that, you can see that the new feature has been pushed, so any other developers working on the project can see can go in and they can see the feature. And over time, if you think there's like lots of developers working on this project, you can kind of split the different features up in a nice way, because they're all prefixed by this feature. So it saves you the difference between the standard Git repository is it basically does these prefixes and it gives you some command line tools. But it helps you to work in a standardized way where you're not just typing any name that you like for your thing and it's all an unordered or unorganized mess. You're going to have all your features prefixed by feature, and then it's the same for like bug fixes and hot fixes. So you can do there's Git Flow commands for them. I'm not going to go into every single one of them right now, but if you go onto the documentation, then you can see how to use them. I actually mostly just use the feature option at the moment. But if they're just small features and stuff, you could just keep these locally, and you don't have to actually push them. But once you've done your feature and you're happy with it and it's ready to be tested, what you then type git flow feature finish. And what that does is it will automatically merge your changes to the develop branch. So it basically just does the kind of standard flow that you would do, where you would do git merge and everything. It does that automatically, and then it deletes the feature branch. So your project is clean, and you don't have all these excess branches around. So after you've merged a change, it deletes the branch, and then you're good, and you can work on the future branches. So then what you can do is you can then push that code to the develop. Oh, we need to do set upstream. So once you've pushed that code to develop, typically what would happen is any code that's on the develop branch would get deployed to a staging server or a staging site. So then it can be tested. Ideally, that would be an automated process. So it would look for the latest changes on the develop branch, and it would automatically deploy them, and then you can kind of skip the manual deployment and just go and like show people what it is and send it to the testers so they can test it straight away. Some companies don't have that advanced setup, but in an ideal world, you have a kind of staging setup where it would do that, and Jenkins would do that for you. So the Jenkins box. So once you've pushed your change and it's kind of been deployed and tested, and maybe it's been code reviewed or whatever, and other developers have looked at it, you can see that it's pushed these changes here, so developed 1 minute ago. The next step would be to do a release. So once you're happy with the project, you'll do a release. So I'm going to look at the current version number of our project. So we're on currently version 1.0.0. So what you do for a release is you do git flow, see this, so it's git flow release start. Oh no, we need to give it a name. So git flow release, we'll call it 1.0.1, or sorry, 1.0.1, so the next version. Actually, git flow release start, and then the version number. There you go, get it right third time. So you can see that now it switches to the release branch, and it says what we should do here is basically all you do when you switch to release is you just do the bump versions, and it says any last minute changes, but I wouldn't recommend doing them unless they're like really small. So you want to at this stage be ready. You're ready to release, and you are all you want to do is basically increase the version of your file. So we'll go ahead and do that. Version 1.0.1, and then you need to commit that change. Increased version. Okay, and now what you do is you do git flow release finish. It says here that you need to type the name. I found that if you're on the specific branch, you don't need to actually type the name of the branch. So if you're finishing when you finish a feature, or you finish so you finish a release, you just type git flow release finish, and it will finish the one that you're on. So now it's asking, it's basically giving us the merge, asking us to type a commit message for the merge. So this is going to merge, I believe, into our develop branch, and then it asks us for a tag. So unless you have a standard, unless your company has a kind of standardized tagging name or something, which they would tell you about, I just use the name of the version that you're doing. So once that's done, you can save the file, and now it's asking us to merge the tag. So you do that. So now it has merged our changes into the master branch. So it says release branch release /1.0.1 has been merged into master. So now what you could do is you can go git checkout master, git push origin. So this is the important bit here, is you need to, when you do the push, you need to do follow tags, because Git doesn't push the tags unless you specifically say push the tags. So we'll do that, and then it pushes out changes. So now that our changes have been deployed, they can be they'll be picked up by the Jenkins box, and they'll be automatically deployed to the server. So that's kind of a basic introduction to Git Flow. It's really one of those tools that you just have to use it. Once you use it for a little bit, you'll realize that how much benefit it can offer. I found it really useful. I found it really helpful because sometimes it's, there's no very clear standard on what the process is for developing, then you can just get branches with all kinds of commits to all kinds of different branch names and stuff, and it just gets a bit crazy. So I found that using Git Flow really helped standardize, and if the whole team uses it, then it's a very standardized approach to deployment. And it helps to improve collaboration, because it encourages you to split up your different features into different feature branches. It helps you with working with separate work streams. So if you have multiple teams working on the same project, or you are working on one project, but you maybe are switching between different features, like that sometimes happens in companies where you're working on one thing, and then all of a sudden someone else a senior manager comes to you, and they ask you to basically drop what you're doing and fix something else or work on something else. It helps you separate your workflow so that you can easily do that, because if you're doing everything on the master branch, or you're doing everything on the develop branch, and then you're asked to drop what you're doing and make a change somewhere else, then that can be quite tedious and difficult, because then you have to go back to previous commits and stuff and try and reverse the work, or just manually undo it. Whereas if you separate everything into feature branches like Git Flow encourages, then that really helps you out in those situations. It also helps to standardize the deployment process, because everything works a lot smoother when there's kind of standard processes for everything, because then you know where you stand. You know that there's not going to be, if you pull down the latest changes, there's not going to be these random changes to the master branch that someone's done that they haven't told you about. Everything will be in the place that's supposed to be. And it helps with automation, because it creates the tags automatically for you, and it helps you kind of standardize the version name and have a standard version name for or tag prefixes and stuff like that, so that you can actually standardize the deployment process or the automation of the workflow, which really helps save time. So yeah, I hope this video has been useful. I'd be interested to hear what you think of Git Flow once you try it out, or if you've already used it. If you've used it already, or you have an alternative system or project or something, application that you use to do this, then I'd definitely be interested to hear that in the comments. So thanks a lot for watching.